been wonderful having you here today at the campus. The students have really enjoyed your presentation. Lots of very interesting information out of that. Can you just tell us a bit about yourself and what you currently do?
Sure. So my background is in applied chemistry, which is what I studied as an undergraduate. And then it became quickly apparent to me that the food industry was going to be a good option for me career-wise because of its longevity and because it would never be superseded. That was sort of my main motivation rather than a love for food. So I moved to Sydney from Melbourne and did a master's degree in cereal chemistry. And from there I was able to be employed in a number of different roles, technical research and development, but also more commercial new product development and things like grain breeding, plant and oat breeding for Uncle Toby. So it gave me a great breadth of understanding across a number of different pillars of the food supply chain. And so it was through that I found that I developed a love of food. From there I went into consumer research for 15 years with food and beverage companies. And then the last 2 years I've been with the peak body for food scientists, our membership institution, which is the Australian Institute of Food Science and Technology. And in that role I do quite a bit of consulting and work around project management, and really raising the profile of the institute is the other main part of my role.
Great, great. During your presentation, you spoke a bit about megatrends. Mm-hmm. Could you please explain what megatrends are, mm-hmm. and what's one of the megatrends you're seeing at the moment emerging?
So megatrends are changes in values or beliefs by a global population usually that has been precipitated by large social or political or economic events. So a good example is the change in attitude that people had towards their own security and safety after 9/11 and the GFC. One of the important trends that I'm seeing at the moment is this focus on sustainability. So people are starting to feel more concerned, and it's more top of mind how food organisations, how farmers, anyone in the supply chain is managing their organisation to reduce impact on the environment. Mm-hmm. How are they ensuring that they recycle packaging, for example, and what are they doing in the waste area? So the waste that they would inevitably generate, how are they reusing that or reworking it or adding value to different areas of the supply chain? And consumers are far more interested in understanding that sort of sustainability angle from an environmental and social benefit point of view.
Mm. Obviously you're involved in the food science area, mm-hmm. so from that point of view, what can Australian farmers potentially improve on?
I think there's definitely room for Australian farmers to understand more of the links in the supply chain from the time their product or whatever it is that they're producing leaves the farm gate to when it ends up on the consumer's plate or in the consumer's mouth. Some farmers are very au fait with this and are across the supply chain. Many organisations are completely vertically integrated, so they understand all stages. But I think for any farmer, treating their operation as a business, with a business focus and perhaps less of an emotional focus, if they're interested in doing that, would absolutely benefit them in terms of growth. So keeping an eye on food trends, understanding the political and economic changes and how they might affect the consumer's perception and their buying patterns, for example. Keeping in touch with nutrition, I think, is really important. Nutritional considerations are far more top of mind now than they used to be with consumers. So I think that is extremely important. And also the way people buy and cook their food and what the next generation, how the millennials are eating. So, for example, we know with the millennials, they snack far more often than, say, Generation X. And we know that the ageing population have much smaller meals because they certainly don't need the food that they once did. So, there's opportunity there to look at ingredients, look at the supply chain and see how we might meet those needs further down the line.
That's very interesting. You've obviously had a chance to meet some of the students here.
Yes.
They're all coming out of an agricultural context somewhere. So what could be some key messages for them? Because they're obviously on the cusp of venturing into this big world and lots of exciting changes out there for egg production. So what would be some of the key things that they could do or focus on?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of messages I often give, and it sounds a bit unusual, but I think they resonate. And that is, if you're in farming, you're in food. And if you're in the food business, you're in the fashion business. And you might never think that as you're fencing or driving your combine harvester, but you are actually in the fashion business because many trends are fashion when it comes to food. And, you know, making a successful business and making sure we understand this fashion is really important. So I think once they understand that, that's quite important. The other thing I would say is the importance of networking. So extending the network beyond other farmers, which is important, like without a doubt, and the numbers show that in a community and sharing of ideas is really important. But to work well to extend their networks beyond their immediate contemporaries. So for example, today I was talking to a number of students about how they might access some government groups or Food Innovation Australia Limited or even the Australian Institute of Food Science and Technology about creating networks. It's easier now with online and webinars and things that we do to understand more about the rest of the supply chain and form those important relationships, to have the conversations. The other advice I give is have a coffee with anyone in the business because you never know where it might lead. And so many of these things are based on networking relationships.
Very, very good advice. Well, thank you, Sarah. It's been an enjoyable experience and good luck with it all.
Thank you, Yasmin.